Hey, welcome back, everyone. Our topic today is the stolen blessing. Genesis 27, 1 through 37, and verse 41 through 45. If you don't have the book with us, it's probably just easiest to read Genesis 27, 1 through 45. 45 verses, not too long, but we see this story of Jacob stealing his brother Esau's blessing. So some time has eclipsed since our story yesterday, where Isaac takes Rebekah to be his wife. Now, in this story, Isaac is old and on his deathbed. So again, the Bible sometimes covers a lot of time in big leaps and ties in these certain important stories to just give us a grasp of covenantal history. And this book in particular, as I've stated, is kind of taking stories from the important stories. So there are some things we miss. Now, this is for time's sake. This is to give us the whole picture, like I said, in about a 6-month period. So there are times where we want to go deeper and really dig into a text and maybe spend months on a book. And then there's other times where you just want a big picture and get through things, okay? And that's what we're doing here in the second one. So in case you say, hey, why didn't they put this story in? There's going to be a lot that gets skipped. Well, I don't know about a lot, but there's going to be some things that you could say, well, they should have probably mentioned that. And I will mention one right now. That is, Esau sold his birthright to Jacob for a bowl of soup. So that's the one thing that I think is kind of important that is missing in this story. So we see Jacob here deceiving his father to get the covenantal blessing of head of home, to be the authority there of the lineage of Isaac's home. But what we missed was that Esau comes in one day and is famished, is hungry from hunting in the field, and he doesn't want to take time and cook his own stew and meal, but tells Jacob that he would sell his birthright to Jacob if he gave him some of his lentil soup. And, he makes the famous statement, what good is my birthright if I'm dead? He's totally exaggerating, right? Like, I'm so hungry, I'm about to die. So what good is a birthright? What is all these inheritance rights going to do for me if I'm dead? Now, he probably wasn't going to really die, but he lost sight of the blessing of God, of the promise of God, of putting to death the instant gratification of the flesh for the covenantal promise of God that was going to come to him. And he willingly gave that over to Jacob. Now, the Bible doesn't tell us in this story why now Esau still tries to go and get that blessing from his dad, but Jacob surely felt justified, I'm sure, in some sense, that it was rightfully his, that Esau had given it over to him. And the Bible, although what Jacob does here is wrong, as he connives his dad, the Bible later in the New Testament really condemns Esau more so because he lost sight of the importance of God's blessing and sold his birthright for a soup, that he is the one that ultimately acted most wickedly because he didn't appreciate the blessing of his father, or he took it lightly, or thought that he could deceive his brother and maybe just by force take it anyway. We don't really know the reasons, because the scripture doesn't clearly say. But whatever the reason, Jacob gets the blessing of his father through a little bit of conniving there. And, it really raises the question of why couldn't the father pull back his blessing? Why did God bless this conniving move, one could even ask. And I like the little subheading in the if you have the book that we're reading. Again, if you don't have it, I put the subheading in the description each day, but I'm just going to read it because it's short today. It says, God continued to develop in the new nation of Israel by giving 2 sons to Isaac, Jacob and Esau. Jacob was a liar who tricked his brother Esau into giving him his inheritance. Although God does not approve of deceit, he is able to overcome man's evil and still accomplish his purposes. Ultimately, God would never be able to use any of us if he couldn't use sinners, right? So, again, we don't have all the answers as to why Jacob, who was supposed to be righteous and holy and doing things correctly, would do this or go about it in a way of deceit. Again, maybe he justified it because his brother was not willingly going to give it to him. And I'm sure something like that occurred where he said, hey, you sold me your birthright. I'll forget you. Something like that would have had to occur for Jacob to probably feel like he had to connive it from Esau. But I think the important thing to remember here is that, one, as I said, the New Testament really condemns Esau's action of losing sight of his birthright. For Jacob, it appears, would not have done this had he not rightfully felt Esau had sold it to him. But secondly, it's that question I just raised about why couldn't the father take back his blessing? And I think it goes to show the importance of our words of Isaac here, who means what he says, of putting the covenantal blessing of God and stating those things, how one would take serious the blessing of the Lord, the covenant of the Lord, their words. It reminds me of our time in church when we come and we are baptized, or we take the Lord's Supper, or we make a promise, a vow to God. How important that is, that I think Isaac truly saw that and knew and understood that these things cannot be done haphazardly or frivolously, that there is order, right, to what God has laid forth. And so that was just interesting, as I think about all those things. Some of them we don't have answers to, but let's look at the two questions they asked today. How did Jacob trick Esau and deceive Isaac? He as you see in the story there, he takes goat skins and makes it feel hairy and rough like he's a fieldman. 2, what promise was given to Jacob? That he would basically have the authority of the family, that he would rule over his brothers and have he would be the leader of the family and take the inheritance, if you will. 3, what suffering did Jacob bring upon himself and his mother? Well, Esau wanted to kill him after that, so Jacob had to flee, and it caused some family problems, no doubt. Sin always causes problems, and what Jacob did here by deceiving his father was sinful. Again, whether he had the right to take the birthright from Esau by selling it for soup is another story. But the fact that he deceived his father is clearly wrong. But this is where we end our story today. Take of it what you will. We see the good, the bad, and the ugly. Scripture does not whitewash things. It lays it before us as it happens, and that's why we can trust it, right? It's not trying to tell us a sweet story where there's, the hero in the story is always doing good against bad guys. Sometimes, like in real life, there's the good, the bad, and the ugly all mixed in. And at the end of the day, we just need to trust in God and do right, and see that even though we probably haven't always done right, even though we've done things wrong in the past, we just really need to trust God now, today, for him to lead us and direct us, turn from sin, allow him to bless us as we follow him as his people. And with that, we'll see you guys tomorrow.